And we welcome you here in the circle on D1 Softball. I'm Eric Lopez here at the press box at the UCF Softball Complex. Victor Anderson's back on the In the Circle studios. Victor, look who I got next to me here in the press box.
Only the one and only voice of the Texas Longhorns, our good friend, Mr. Andrew Haynes, joining us on this episode of Has Eric and the people from Orlando treated you and your Longhorn faithful well this weekend, sir?
Yeah, I'd say it's been pretty nice. They've been pretty good and very accommodating. And Eric got me a booth here in the press box, which I didn't have up at Florida State. So it's been enjoyable.
So UCF over Florida State in booth accommodations. Check. Duly noted.
Oh, yeah. I'll take that as a win. Very good. We're going to have a lot to talk to Andrew about here about Texas and the Big 12 a little bit. Victor is going to keep us updated the rest of the show. We're recording this particular segment prior to Game 3 of Texas UCF on Sunday. Victor, we got another guest coming up later in the show, so we got a lot to get to here on In the Circle on D1 Softball. But let's get to it here. Let's get Andrew here. First, you're part of history here. We're doing this for the first time. Give me your thoughts on your Longhorns here as we see this. You've been in Florida since Tuesday. I feel like you're now a fellow resident, so welcome. But you run-ruled Florida State. It was the first time since the Florida State's been run-ruled at home since 2014 against Michigan, so that's impressive. You've beaten the first two games from UCF here. You're off to an incredible start. What has surprised you, if anything, about this year's Texas team?
I'd say it's probably the freshmen that have contributed. They've had, and now, they're very highly touted freshmen. Tegan Gavan and Caden Henry and Katie Stewart have been integral parts to this team. Last year's freshman class was outstanding. And, they did great. And this year's freshman class has continued that. And even, players coming off the bench. Vic Hunter has played well. Adea Wallace, a good runner. Ryan Brown hit a 288-foot home run at home last weekend. And so I think that plus the poise that they showed early in the season, I think just as a whole, especially, it's still a very young team with last year's freshman class getting a lot of playing time. This year's freshman class getting a lot of playing time. They have a couple of juniors, a couple of seniors that are getting some time, but they've played like a fully veteran team.
We're recording this. Texas is doing batting practice. They're on pace to shatter a lot of school records offensively. And I spoke to Mike White earlier this week on the conference call. He talked about what he likes about this offense is like diversity. They can do small ball, hit you with the long ball. Just talk about this offense, and in particular, Steve Singleton, who runs the offense with Kristen Zaleski running the short game, because they don't get enough talk. We always focus on the head coaches, Andrew, but I always like to highlight the assistants, kind of like football. In football they do. Why don't we do that in softball? So talk about this whole staff and they complement each other there from an offensive standpoint first.
Yeah, they clearly they all know what they're doing. Singleton has experience in minor league baseball. Before he got to Texas, he was coaching both baseball and softball hitting. And so he has a lot of experience doing that. Kristen Zaleski, of course, an All-American at Texas State and an assistant coach and a head coach. And she knows the job. And they get along very well from what I can tell. And so there's a lot of complimenting each other. There's a lot of meetings every game where, they're all, the two of them and Mike White are getting together and discussing strategy. And I think that when you have people who are excited for the job and they interact with the players well and they know their job, I think it just lends to a much better situation.
And then pitching-wise, you've obviously got the, Teagan, the freshman phenom. You got, obviously, Estelle Check, the veteran, coming out of the bullpen more. Matt Morgan's kind of been used more as a bullpen, but can also start. Just talk about this rotation with Patty Ruth Taylor as the pitching coach, who Mike White brought in, who was impressed with when he played Lehigh, liked what he saw, and has given reins a little bit to Patty Ruth Taylor so he can focus on all of the entire aspect of the team.
Exactly. Yeah. Patty Ruth seems like she's been great for the staff and been able to help them hone in and focus. And so they're able to work on stuff even when Mike's not around. The pitching staff as a whole, it's been outstanding. And you look at the three losses and, the one against Stanford, there was a drop fly ball in the first inning that led to 2 unearned runs. And then the 8th inning run with the international tiebreaker unearned, obviously. The one against Houston was just a complete blow up. In the first inning, Silali Gutierrez allowed was it 4 runs and 3 home runs and a double and got 1 out. And if you take that out of her ERA is like 0.40. And then the defense hurt later in that game as well. And Tegan Kavan as well, she against LSU, she got 1 out and allowed 5 runs. And there was a play to start the game where it went as a hit, but the shortstop wasn't able to get it out of her glove clean. And had she done that, would have had the out. Maybe Tegan allows 1 run in that first inning. And so I think as a whole, other than those little blowups here and there, it's just been outstanding. They are keeping opponents off balance. They are getting good swingings and misses, and they're just dominant. They seem to keep growing in confidence. I think the better they do, and the more confidence they get, they're just mowing teams down.
This is coming up here as a big stretch. Obviously, you've been on the road here in Florida for a while. Next weekend, you're going to Stillwater against Oklahoma State, which is always a big, intense rivalry between the two. Last time you two will play in a conference regular season series is conference foes. I've talked to both Mike White and Kenny Gajewski. They want to play continuing moving forward, so there's no hostility or anything like that. Couple weeks after, and then after that, the big one at home against Oklahoma, which talking to people on both sides, that could be maybe the biggest regular season series in that rivalry's history. Then you play Baylor on that. Just talk about this stretch. This is a big stretch because I think right now, and some might disagree, but at this point, just as of today, I think the top 4 teams have kind of separated themselves a little bit from an Oklahoma, Texas, Georgia, Stanford, in no particular order, just from a resume standpoint. I think if I had to do a region of selections for national seeds, those would be your top 4 in some combination. I think the next few weeks can really dictate a lot Texas from a Big 12 championship and how high the ceiling could be for Texas. I think Texas at no worse will be a 4 national seed if they play to their abilities, but the 1 seed is still there for the taking, as well as the Big 12 title. And also, tell me the next few weeks here. This is an incredible stretch coming up.
It's going to be absolutely huge. There's, I think it's probably a good thing that they are starting to work out some kinks. The defensive issues against Houston, against LSU. They had some issues against BYU, even in the game that they won a week ago on Friday, and the closer game of the series. And I think they're able to work out the kinks. You've seen here that. I mean, they're making some outstanding plays. And up in Tallahassee on Wednesday, there were some great plays as well. And I think the defense is showing up. They're getting more confidence as well. And I think that's key because it's, as I mentioned, it's been the defense when this team has lost. That has been the main letdown. They put up 3 runs off of Nigeria Kennedy and, allowed 3 unearned runs and lost by 1. So I think the defense is huge. I think last year, the sweep against Oklahoma State at home was big. Of course, 2 years ago, they went to the national semifinals against Oklahoma State. And I think, mentally calculating that up to that point, from when I started in 2017 broadcasting this team, they had won 2, maybe 3 games against Oklahoma State out of 15 or 20. And so I think, taking that, the 2 games in the semifinals, was good. And then last year with the freshman class and especially Reese Atwood coming through, that gave them some belief that they can finally beat this Oklahoma State team and they can win some games. And then, against Oklahoma last year, they nearly had 1 game.
And to lead the 7th.
And lead the 7th, yeah. And Oklahoma did Oklahoma things.
Yeah.
And they came back. And then Baylor, Baylor, that'll be an interesting series because Texas was swept by Baylor last year. And 2 years ago, Texas suffered their worst loss in program history to Baylor. That's 17-3 or something at home. And so, I don't know why that one's not the last week in the regular season, as it had always been, but it's earlier this year. But this is a huge stretch. It'll show what the Longhorns are made of. The young players have to step up. There's a couple players have been scuffling here and there, swinging the bat, and if they can get going, if they can get their pitches to hit and drive them, I think there's a good chance for a lot of success.
Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned the defense. I mean, Saturday's game against UCF, a great example. Estelle Check throws the ball away first, gets UCF to tie the game up, and then Texas bounces back. But you're right, and when you play the Oklahomas of the world, it was interesting because the stats suggest your defense is the question mark. Mike White kind of pushed back on that when I asked him about the defense and where it's at. He just feels, hey, we're more athletic than ever before. So we get to more balls, which sometimes means we're going to be maybe be too aggressive, make more two errors as a result. So it was interesting what he had to say.
Yeah.
I know Victor is itching here because he is blown away. Victor, you seen how organized this man is? Look at this professional right
I
here.
sat next to him last year when Iowa was doing that tournament in USF, and the preparation and the detail that Andrew Haynes has is up there with the elite in college softball. So I'm fully aware of his setup. And by the way, Eric, about that stretch, they got a midweek versus Texas State.
Don't remind them. Trust me, they've asked. They've already.
Don't worry. Yeah, so I just want to give that full context. Now, we talked about Reese Atwood and her performance all year, rightfully deserved. But their offense as a whole with Texas, with everyone contributing in the lineup, what's been the biggest surprise for you, Andrew, in terms of the offense for this Longhorn team? Because Atwood gets the honors, rightfully so, but 1 through 9 on the options off the bench, everybody has had a moment where they've contributed to Texas being where they are so far this season.
Yeah, and I think that again goes back to the freshmen and the main freshmen who've been in the lineup, Caden Henry, Katie Stewart. Yeah, they came in with some big accolades, and Henry, the NFCA National Player of the Week, Big 12 Player of the Week, the second week of the season, and Stewart has lit things up. She slowed down a little bit recently, but coming off the bench, Vic Hunter is batting almost 500 and has like 5 extra base hits. I think the freshmen are the main surprise, even with how highly touted they were, because they played such a difficult schedule so far. You don't see a team play this kind of schedule and, pretty much every freshman and every player coming out with these type of averages, these stolen bases, runs scored, RBI. It's just a situation where you have a stretch of slap hitters who can also hit for power. You also have power hitters who are no slowpokes. And almost everyone can do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
And I think it's so remarkable is that kind of, Eric, what you talked about earlier, how you're diverse and you can win different ways. If you want to win 2-1 with a small ball game, you can do that. If you want to play a slugfest 12-8, we got the bats to do that as well. So it kind of gives Coach White a freedom, and Coach Singleton, as you will, to adjust as you're playing your opponent game by game, and particularly inning by inning, based on how things are going.
Yeah, definitely. And, Mike White made a comment in the post game yesterday that using Adea Wallace running on first base after Katie Simmons got a base hit, that was huge. She was able to score on the Vivi Martinez double. And so they know what their players can do. They know what the matchups allow for their players to do. And so they put their players in spots to succeed. And I think the belief in those players is helping them to succeed. And, Katie Simmons, Leanne Good. Simmons was a starter the last 2 years, Big 12 All-Freshman 2 years ago. Leanne Good was Big 12 All-Freshman last year. And they've been coming off the bench, and they've still succeeded. They're not pouting and sitting there and going up and, watching 3 strikes. They're competing. They're showing that, hey, when someone else is scuffling, I need to be in the lineup. I can contribute. And so I think the coach's belief in them and putting them in those situations has been huge.
It's tremendous. Let me ask you about UCF. Obviously, they're in the first year in the Big 12. You've seen the Big 12 now. You know what it worked, all the places, etc. What advice would you give UCF as they move forward into this Big 12, not just this year but beyond, and the different level that you see on a week-to-week basis in the Big 12? They're finding that out this year by playing Oklahoma State, Texas back to back. I mean, it's unbelievable. UCF, as we record this, has the 8th strongest schedule now in the country. 8. So while people, some of the fans here are like, chirping about the win-loss record, you got to put some context into that. But what advice would you give them now that you've seen this Plex, you've seen their team, the program, Coach Cindy Ball Malone, and as they move forward in the Big 12?
Well, after this year, hit the transfer portal with 11 seniors. Is that right? Like, holy cow!
Yeah.
That's all, and a lot of them were playing. That's a lot to lose. I think that definitely building up the pitching staff is going to be one big thing. If you don't have 3 or 4 pitchers who can get the job done, and at least 2 who can get it done on any given day, you're not going to compete for a title in the Big 12. Everyone can hit. Texas Tech can hit. Iowa State can surprise people. Kansas is surprising people.
Big time, yeah.
Big time. Baylor is annually a top 25 team again. And I think you just need to be, have the depth in the pitching staff and overall. If you suffer a couple injuries and, you're not very deep, then again, you know, you're going to be struggling for offense. And so I think depth is probably the main thing that schools in the Big 12 need to focus on.
Well, it's a great point you make because obviously you've got depth pitching wise. Oklahoma has depth. You look at teams like Kansas with obviously Hamilton, Casey Hamilton, but now they just got Lizzie Ludwig back, who's been the all freshman a year ago. She's back healthy now. Katie Brooks. So they got 3 armed starters they can go with. Baylor, when they were healthy, had 3 starters. We'll get to them in a moment. But right now in Big 12, that's my big takeaway is you need 3 legit starters
minimum
with bullpen help to get deep into Big 12. And I think UCF's still not there. They have a lot of arms, but I don't believe they have 3 consistent starters. I think they have Sarah Willis, who you got to see on Saturday's magnificent. And they have a lot of nice arms, but quite frankly, most of them were basically playing in the American in the Big 12. So I think that's a fantastic point you bring up about the depth that I think gets lost.
Yeah. I think, you know, Sarah Willis was great yesterday. She was, you know, shutting down the Longhorns with her changeup, and they were, I think, just, you know, looking harder, and she was getting the changeup in for 2 strikes, and then there were a lot of swings and misses, a lot of weak contact, and you know, Willis, I think, is a senior, so she's going to graduate, and yeah, you have to find someone else to replace her. You have to, you know, improve the other pitchers. I mean, Texas coming off of last year, I think, from what Mike told me, they pretty much every pitcher that returned. So they returned all their pitchers from last year. And I think every one of them made strides in their arsenals, and they were able to add some different pitches and control pitches better and vary their speeds better. And so that is, you know, improving just development is big as well.
Let's quick thought on the Big 12. Baylor's got a lot of issues. Mackenzie Wilson out suspended with an off-field situation over there at Baylor. Orem is hurt again. So you got right now they've been depending on Crandall and Binford as we talked. They're without Tobin, their shortstop. So they're not where people thought. They're the injury issues. Kansas has been the big surprise. Texas Tech, Greg Snyder has a great offense. Of course, they have a weird situation with Iowa State with the snow out. What do you think of the Big 12? I think this is a great chance for them to get 6-7 bids into the tournament, which would be the most in a while. I know when I did the Big 12 media days throughout the league, a lot of the coaches felt this is the deepest the league has been. We've proven by BYU taking a game from Oklahoma State. Your thoughts on that? I think 6-7 bids is in play here for the Big 12.
Absolutely. And I think the past couple of years, I've been seeing it improve. And, you know, when Mike came in, we'll start with that in 2019, it was Texas, Oklahoma. Baylor was starting to bounce back, or that might have been their down year. Oklahoma State, and everyone else was kind of an also ran. And you know, over the last couple of years, Jen McFalls has improved the Jayhawks, and she's doing some good things. And obviously, swept Baylor. Texas Tech, Craig Snyder doing some great things. They gave the Longhorns quite a scare last year a couple of times. Iowa State plays Texas well every year. And so I think they all have the ability to get in to the regionals. And I think the past couple of years, their resumes were probably hurt a little bit by having such a small retinue of Big 12 teams. There were 7 total teams.
JT Gasso, Oklahoma's associate coach, mentioned that to me when I talked to him before the season.
Yeah. And so, you know, you were having teams that were decent that were taking 15 losses in conference play. And I mean, that hurts your overall record. That hurts your you know, chances of getting in. And so I think, you know, having a bigger Big 12 and having more talent and the teams improving, you have a better chance to win day in and day out. And so that I think it's a better chance for more teams to get in.
Victor, you get a couple last questions in, Vic.
Your biggest takeaway, Andrew, from what you want to see from Texas from this stretch against UCF going into Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, and the rest of your season going forward?
I think more consistency. You know, Reese Atwood, she's been scuffling a bit, and you know what I've mentioned in the pregame interviews with the coaches, and they've responded with, you know, yeah, she's struggling, but her struggling is still a hit a game with probably an RBI or 2 RBI game, and she's popping a lot up. And if she can really start to square things up again, then that'll be absolutely enormous for the next couple of weeks. You know, I think Katie Stewart getting back in the lineup and swinging better would be big. And just overall defensively, they seem to maybe on easier plays just have a little more problem. And so, you know, they try to they make the tough plays outstanding. They do a great job on the tough plays, just being more consistent and, you know, focusing and the pitching. I think making sure that you don't allow a crooked number in the first inning. That's going to be probably the biggest thing against any of these opponents. You don't fall down by 4 or 5 runs. You're in the game. You have a shot.
That is the voice, Texas radio voice, Andrew Haynes. What year season is this?
8.
8th season.
Yep.
So just for the record, you like this setup better than Clearwater? Just confirm.
Absolutely.
Where'd you do the UCF Texas broadcast in 22 from?
Oh man, that was on a platform elevated above the left field fence. I distinctly remember Lauren Burke jogging out to left field at one point, looking up and seeing me and going, and it's like, it was kind of a, why are you up there type of deal. And so, of course, I did back in 2019, did it from on top of the dugout as well.
Oh, boy, that's a great view there.
Yeah. And so both of those, are situations where it's one metal ladder that's straight vertical. And they were going to have me do that for a couple games this year. And I started to climb up one of them before the games that got rained out. And it was like rainy and slippery. I'm like, I hope I do not have to do this. And luckily for that, it got rained out. Unluckily, it was going to be against a couple good teams. But yeah, that's always an adventure up there.
You and Victor like to live on the wild side when it comes to broadcast setups. I praise you both on that. I'm very conservative when it comes to that. Andrew Haynes, Texas radio voice. Tell where they can find you.
Yeah, listen to the games on the TexasSports.com website. There's a little fans option, and you can go to audio and bring up the audio player and listen to the games there. There's also a Texas app, and then we're actually on the iHeart Radio app this year. If you look for KHFI HD3, I believe it's called. You can listen to games on iHeartMedia as well.
Thank you for doing this, taking the time before we get on the air on the broadcast there. This is kind of cool. First for us here at In the Circle. We've done over 800 appearances. You've been on many at times, but this is just, I wanted to do this in person, and you've always been awesome with us on the show, and we'll definitely have you back on. But thanks for doing this, and it's good to see you, man.
Appreciate it. Good to see you guys.
Thanks for watching this latest video. To unlock more content, click on the subscribe button and turn on your notifications. Follow us on social media by clicking at In the Circle SB down at the bottom, or download In the Circle wherever you listen to your podcast in the description field.